Happy Sunday, everybody. I'm Danilo Evangelista. Happy Father's Day as well. Welcome to our tropical weather video discussion for today, June 16th, 2024. We have several things to talk about today, including areas of interest that we're watching in the Atlantic. So let's get started with that, shall we? Starting off with the National Hurricane Center homepage, taking a look at what they expect over the next 7 days. First of all, we have our area of interest that we've been watching for probably weeks now. In the Bay of Campeche, now up to a 60% chance of potential formation in the next 7 days. Over the next week, looks like we're very likely to get something to occur in the Bay of Campeche. And then meanwhile, we have as well off the southeast coast too, and you could actually take a look at the cone. It's directed towards potentially the southeast coast. This is something that is uptrended in the models over the last day. That's something, if you remember 90L, we had an area of interest that was off the southeast coast just several days ago. It looks like a piece of energy from that area, or otherwise what was 90L, is breaking off, and it looks like it's going back south, and it might have a chance to develop in the Bahamas. We'll take a look at the models though in just a moment to see just exactly how that plays out. But first off, in the Eastern Pacific as well, there's an area 2 to watch. This only has a 20% chance though, and it doesn't look like anything major in the Eastern Pacific is going to get going over the next week or so. Here's a satellite look though of the Atlantic. You could see definitely not anything though as of right now very concrete, although you could definitely see lots of convective activity with clouds and thunderstorms in the Caribbean associated with our area of interest that we have for the Bay of Campeche. The area that we're looking at right now, though, there's really a lot of disorganized, very broad, it's very a broad scope of energy that we have in the Caribbean, and it's really going to be, it moves over the Bay of Campeche. And it's really going to depend on how much we see all this energy consolidate once it gets to the Bay of Campeche and has the best chance for development. But you can see, though, there's definitely energy there, especially in the Eastern Pacific. There's a lot of energy right now. It's all part of, once again, this big sort of monsoonal setup associated with our Central American gyre. That is why we're getting this development chance in the first place. It really depends, though, on, once again, how much it's able to concentrate in the Bay of Campeche. Elsewhere, though, across the Atlantic, you could see some sort of frontal system. This is what we're going to have to watch for, some sort of piece of energy to kind of break off and then move back south and potentially try to get its act together if it's able to close off enough that we might see some sort of development occur in the Bahamas nearing the southeast coast. And then the MDR, still quiet right now. It's only June 16th. We're not really expecting that much to occur in this part of the Atlantic anyways, so doesn't look like we'll get much in terms of MDR activity right now, although we do have obviously a few showers and thunderstorms probably associated with the few waves that we have out there, plus the ITCZ as well, but nothing major in terms of development expected right now, and really anywhere else except obviously the Western Atlantic, where we're watching some areas. And you can see, though, definitely, at least in terms of development, I mean, it's been the talk of the town basically since the beginning of the year, but sea surface temperature anomalies definitely reflective of favorable conditions, especially throughout the Caribbean, even off the southeast coast too, where we're watching the potential for development as well. You can see, on average, we're definitely above normal in terms of our sea surface temperatures there. But especially in the Gulf, especially the Bay of Campeche too, and even into the Caribbean, it's really been the talk of the town of how warm this general area has been since the start of the year, and even especially since the spring. The Gulf of Mexico has been really, really warm and much above normal, as well as the MDR too. It's been basically something we've all been saying since the end of last year, how warm the MDR has been, and overall, this is just generally going to reflect into potentially a very active hurricane season this year, especially obviously with La Nina incoming. But I guess to get a better idea of just how warm these sea surface temperatures actually are, because what I have right now is the sea surface temperature map, anomalies, I should say, not the actual map of the actual sea surface temperatures, but the anomalies, and they represent departures from the average rather than what the actual sea surface temperatures themselves. So, how does it look like when we actually look at what the sea surface temperatures are in reality? And you can see, look at just at how widespread, specifically in the Bay of Campeche, what catches my interest is we have readings up to 30 degrees Celsius in the Bay of Campeche. So that means regardless of whatever happens, all of this energy is going to be moving into, and is already pockets of very, very warm sea surface temperatures. So at least when it comes to one of the factors that we look at in terms of development, it is definitely a plus, that the Bay of Campeche is very warm. It's just really dependent, once again, on how broad this sort of system stays, because it is not just one small vorticity area that we're watching in the Caribbean that'll potentially move into the Bay of Campeche and develop. It's this broad sort of gyre. That's what it is. It's a Central American gyre that we're seeing set up right now, and it's very broad in terms of the envelope of vorticity it encompasses, and if it really depends on how much it's going to be able to concentrate in the Bay of Campeche in terms of whether or not this will actually become a tropical system. So, to see whether or not that happens, let's actually take a look at the models now, starting off with the GFS. You can see by hour 36, you can see the energy over the Yucatan Peninsula, very broad in terms of how much there is, but obviously, as you see, once we get over to the Gulf, we kind of see a little bit more concentration occurring, and then really quickly back to the east, you could actually see what the GFS has, some sort of energy associated with the front that we have right now in the Atlantic. This is all associated with at least the remnants of 90L. You can kind of see how that works, where it seems like a southern piece of that energy breaks off, and then it tries to concentrate into some sort of system, and then you can see, especially by hour 102, within the next 4 to 5 days, fast-moving system for sure, but definitely tries to concentrate, and you could definitely see by hour 108. So this is roughly 4.5 days from now. There's definitely some sort of system that tries to concentrate and potentially form. That definitely looks like some sort of, not bona fide, but it looks like a decent sort of system that you would maybe watch for the potential that it develops, and then it moves into Florida. And then by day 5, it's already inland. It's a very quick moving system. There's a huge ridge on top of it, and we talked about this big ridge before, how it might fuel very warm temperatures to the eastern part of the United States over the next week or so. So we have that system developing underneath it that moves into Florida, and then we're now at hour 126. But you could see the biggest issue with our Bay of Campeche system, you can see on the GFS, it stays very broad. Seems like they have some sort of northern piece of energy trying to develop, and then maybe that gets close to Texas, or at least it stays near Mexico. But you could generally see what the GFS does in terms of development, and I think this is the biggest issue that we need to watch for, is how broad this system generally stays, because I could tell you right now, if it stays as broad as the GFS shows, not really sure if we're going to get too much to consolidate with this. One thing you definitely should watch is that, unlike with this system that we're watching in the Bay of Campeche here, we're not seeing something like this, like what we have off the southeast coast, where we see a small concentrated pocket of vorticity. This is not what we see really in the Bay of Campeche. We start to see it try to happen, but it generally remains very broad, and it doesn't really concentrate much. But it does seem like, interestingly enough, and this is as we get towards about as far out as I want to go with the GFS, hour 168, it does seem like they maybe try again. Maybe we might try to see something again develop in the Bay of Campeche. I think I mentioned this several days ago when I did my last video update, but it does seem like, actually, interestingly enough, this sort of general gyre setup does remain in the Atlantic, past this sort of first system that we're watching right now in the Bay of Campeche, and then it kind of remains afterwards. So we might see another chance for something to occur, but even that at hour 168, it's still far out, but the GFS still shows that kind of remain disorganized and very messy as of right now. So that's the GFS. What about the European? And this is why this system off the southeast coast, really quickly before we get to the European shows with the gyre setup. But especially off the southeast coast, notice the European as well, at least on the 0Z run. They also really concentrate this storm off the southeast as well. And we always talk about how if there's multiple models that are showing a potential signal, then that may be something that we need to watch for potential development, especially if it's not just the GFS or even the European that is showing it alone. Both of the models seem to have some sort of concentrating energy that moves through the Bahamas and then into the southeast. So seems like there's some sort of general agreement that something will try to happen, and then we might be looking at potentially some sort of tropical system for northern Florida. So there's the agreement, and that's where that whole general area of interest is coming from. What about the Bay of Campeche? And you can see too on the European, notice how I really don't know how else to explain it, but just how broad the general area, the general envelope of vorticity remains. It just remains really broad, and it doesn't really concentrate that much, at least on the European. And this will be the main thing that we need to watch once again in terms of development, is how broad does this system remain. Remains really broad on the European, and then after that at hour 168, you notice too, even on the European, if the first system doesn't form, maybe there might be something else that the European is trying to latch onto, like the GFS, past this first sort of system that tries to get going, as it does seem like there's still some sort of leftover vorticity with the Central American gyre that remains. So it might be, multiple cases where we're going to see chances for development continue to occur, maybe until something happens, or maybe something might not happen. We'll just have to see. But either way, really quickly, just to kind of give a check on climatology, whether or not anything does happen, this is where we are in the hurricane season. We're in mid-June, and then notice where we are on the climatology graph compared to where most of the activity is. It once again is all the way really in late August and September is when we really start to see the most amount of activity occur in the Atlantic. So even if we don't have anything right now, I can for sure guarantee you that something will happen within the next several weeks, especially as we get towards August and September. I think we're still on track probably for a really active hurricane season. It's just uncertainty in terms of signals right now, in terms of what happens. But either way, the chances are still there, and we're still looking at potentially development to occur. Maybe it might be the southeast, maybe it might be the Bay of Campeche. We'll see. With that being said, though, I'm going to end it off for today. Nice, somewhat brief update. I don't really know if there's too much else to go over besides those two systems. But if you like it, always encourage you, if you like what you saw today, like, comment, subscribe, share with family and friends, comment your thoughts below. And with that being said, stay safe, peace, love, and kindness to you all, and we'll talk again tomorrow.